into things, and for me as a performer, I will fully go into something and fully really experience it. But it's very fulfilling to completely embody an experience with your body.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Hello and welcome to Artversations, a meditative conversation about the artistic process. My name is Brie, like the cheese, and I'm grateful that you chose this podcast. Join the Artversations community as it grows each day. You never know what inspiration you'll find along the way. And as we journey down a path of creative inspiration together, I'm thrilled to continue my partnership with dance theater company Frog in Hand. We are bringing you a behind-the-scenes listen into their summer company. Last Monday, we released an episode surrounding the production side of the company with the bubbly Jada Wallace, so go give it a listen after this. It was raining while we recorded, so you know it's a good one. And the next episode, immediately following this one, will be focused on the dancer perspective of the company. Stay tuned to see who the featured guest will be. Dun, dun, dun. Now, today's episode is all about choreography. I briefly crossed paths with this week's guest back in February, and when I heard he would be working with the summer company, we had to make time to sit down together. Shout out to Colleen Snell, Frog in Hand's artistic director, for connecting me with this human. He is a dance artist and designer from Toronto who embraces different practices and ways of learning wherever he may find himself. More specifically, he is the remounter for one of our pieces in the mixed bill Summer Dances. It's been a complete joy to learn a section of the choreography from The Fall, which is a piece of 2018 repertoire from Frog in Hand. This artist was one of the original performers in the piece and has now remounted the final 12 minutes on myself and my fellow company dancers. And he is certainly a fantastic conversationalist. We talk all about the themes behind The Fall, and in typical Artversations fashion, we go on tangents about embodiment, acting techniques, and even his most inspiring travel adventure. This episode was made possible by the Arts Activation Residency. The Art Shelter is a new home for Mississauga-based dance theater company Frog in Hand, located off-grid in a geo-desic dome. So let's settle in together and learn more about the summer company. Here is 45 minutes with Micha Baltman. How do you feel after a long day of rehearsing?
That's a good question. I especially like leading rehearsals, it's very full on, but I always feel very energized. It's always a very nice high, especially if you're not dancing all the time or dancing a full day. Like any time, like being able to incorporate movement back in your day, if you're not sucked into it 9 to 6 every day, then it can be refreshing.
Right, yeah.
A nice balance. When I'm not doing it all the time and I come back to do it for a little bit, it can feel full on, but it's like that good tired, like energized. It's a nice high.
Well, and you're a great leader in terms of exchanging with us. You know, like we do the warm-up together. It feels really wonderful to warm up with activities or exercises that relate to the choreography. I haven't seen that very often in other spaces that I've been in.
I've been, I guess, developing my practice of sharing work or restaging things or leading people through things. I've been trying to play around with how to teach, how to share, how to educate in these scenarios. And I've worked a lot in the arts high school, so with high school students. And so, we have a limited amount of time, but for me, it's not, I also think back to my experience as a younger dancer working in those spaces, and it's nice to just kind of be thrown material, but I also feel for me, at least educationally, building concepts helps to get you into it and gives you something concrete to hold on to. So I've actually started to incorporate that more and play around with it, especially with high school students, even if it's for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the beginning of an hour that we have together. If we're putting a piece of rep back together, it's kind of introducing concepts so that we can slowly build up and have something to reference back to.
Absolutely. Yes. It makes sense logically, but for some reason, other spaces that I've been in, we just kind of, maybe there's a warm up where people will do what they need to do on the floor, and then all of a sudden we start and it's like, okay, here's the choreo.
Right.
And it doesn't really allow us to ground inside of the process. It just sort of begins. So I've been really enjoying that in your rehearsals, just being able to know, okay, what parts of my warm up are going to be directly related to what we work on. And yeah, and then when you say like, oh, remember what we did in the warm up, this is what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually like activated mentally into that task so much more efficiently.
Yeah, it's nice to break it down and then come back to it. Yeah, I like breaking down things into concepts and thinking about where they come from, or like what this group might need to focus on in order to grow, because it's obviously not just about learning the steps, it's trying to get the performers or the artists to latch on to the work in their own way through different tools.
Absolutely. Especially for young artists.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself teaching young artists a lot?
Yeah, it's a mix. Over my professional career, especially here, I've gone back into the arts high school systems to share work in different ways, and I don't want to teach 100% of the time, but I found that coming in to kind of take people through a journey, especially students at that age, has always been really fulfilling.
How so?
I think the first time I did it was back in 2018. I was working with a group of grade 11 students, and we were remounting a piece of repertory from a choreography that I was in, and we had 6 weeks together, and it was something quite challenging and detailed and a different way of performing, and being able to take them from point A to point B and seeing how much they've grown over that point, and maybe overcome certain challenges or grown into a different mode of performing or artistry or collaboration on stage was very fulfilling.
That's so fascinating how that kind of, I guess I'm going back to exchange, like just what you give to them, they then can give you back in some sort of way.
Yeah.
Hopefully, at least.
Yeah. It's like, even if it's not like, oh, you're making, a piece that's going on professionals that's touring, there's a really, I find, a meaningful artistic exchange that I think goes beyond the normal bounds of education. It becomes a collaboration. It becomes a performance, an improvisation in the moment. And so like how you share and exchange is to me an active performance.
I completely agree. A performance that doesn't, if I know what you mean, is that it's not necessarily like put on or fake.
Yeah.
Because it's created with the people in the room.
Exactly. You're experiencing it. If I'm sharing concepts and trying to, I feel like I'm trying to create the experience and live the experience with them to share these concepts, even if they're more simple.
Right. And just going back to what you were talking about in terms of remounting,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of taking a piece of choreography that maybe is not necessarily yours, you might have a connection to it, but having the task of supporting another vision, I'm really curious about that daunting task. It can be daunting at times. What tools or what kinds of guiding lights do you have in order to remount, repurpose, re-envision?
I think it goes back to, like I said, getting to the roots of where things came from, or those concepts or those feelings that make up the choreography or the section of the work. So for me, it's always about going back to the roots of it, whether it's something that I was a part of the creation or not. It's going back to the roots, the history, where something comes from, the stories, the influence, and then also my personal experience with it. Like performing The Fall was so visceral for me. It was so involved that even after 6 years, I can come back to it. And maybe because of the type of piece that is, it still feels very personal to me, right? And my experience, because it's so sensation and experience based. But even if it's not, even if it's more just movement and detail based, if I've done it, I can go back to the feelings that I have. And that's what I transmit, even if it's not necessarily my quote unquote choreography.
So well said. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up The Fall. You have the incredible task of remounting The Fall for the Frog in Hand Summer Company 2024. And we only have you for 2 weeks or so. And I think, well, we'll say in terms of timeline, I feel really great about having sort of an efficient process of let's just learn, let's just get the tasks, the counts, the beats, and then I'm going to let it marinate in my body for the next, little while. So we've been so fortunate to have you in space, and alongside Colleen, there's this wonderful dynamic between the two of you, sort of bouncing ideas off of each other. It's a piece that was created in 2018, different time from now, but there are certain parallels, I think, in the themes. Because it feels so sensation-based and experience-based, there's visceral emotions that we talk on a lot during the process. Returning to that personal feeling, that personal connection that you had, what has changed?
I would say I've changed. Over 6 years with my own personal growth in different ways. But it's interesting. I feel like I've changed, but I can really return back to, again, the origins or the roots of where things came from. So it's kind of this contrast of it's quite strange doing it after 6 years. It's a really nice treat for me because I feel like I can tap back into those same things, which as a performer and interpreter, those are very satisfying because it feels like a rich kind of tapestry menu to tap into to live through again. But I do feel that coming back to this, I've changed and I feel like a fresh person.
That's beautiful.
Which is, it's nice. It's like things aren't different, but I can recognize a little bit how I've changed, especially when you're coming back to something you've done 6 years ago. It's a good mark to say, oh, wow, that was 6 years ago. Here I am now. It's a good comparison point.
Right. I hear, yeah. There's a kind of a point A to point B and that journey that you've been able to have as an artist and a human as well. I mean, we went through so much in those 6 years as just a society, but I don't know. I'm under the impression that artists are constantly changing, like by the millisecond. There are things that we're feeding into or letting go of. That's a big one for me, at least.
Yeah, I feel like I've changed, but then it's like I can tap into a lot of the images or sensations that came through the piece, and they still very feel authentically me. And it's kind of nice to be able to recognize that again from a further out perspective. One of the first images we created in the piece when Colleen and I were in the studio, I don't think we even had all of the team yet, but we worked on this image of, at least with me, of like what it's like to fly in your dreams. And this is at the very start of the process. And I really enjoy tapping into these memories and images and sensations in a quite poetic way. So that was an image that I could at the time latch onto, created, some writing and poetry about that, which extended it. And from there we developed the image and the movement and the sensation, which led to, there's a part in the middle of the piece where it's me embodying that joy of flying in my dreams. And then I can think about that now and go, yeah, that was a real authentic feeling, and it's still something that feels like me.
That's a visceral dream for sure. I've had it many times where I do wish I could fly. I think more mine has been mostly falling,
yeah.
Which is, I guess, maybe flying. But for me, I've had those dreams and then I'm speeding up as I go, and I only wake up when I've managed to make contact with the floor. In your dreams, if you don't mind sharing about it, as you're flying, do you feel that joy because you're in control of the flight, or is the wind pulling you? Like, what is driving this flight?
Yeah, this image came from I have like the words that I wrote somewhere that I came across, but it's really just like this sensation of floating and having control of where to go, and it's very simple.
Yeah, that'd be
in a way,
nice.
but it was something really sensitive to still tap into.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel really lucky because we got to recreate that in the piece, and I got to kind of relive those sensations physically, which for me was really nice and a treat. But that flying sensation, I really compared to, at least for me, where I got it in real life was scuba diving.
Lovely.
Because when I learned to scuba dive, once you're underwater, for me it didn't feel like swimming. It just felt like the closest you could get to flying, and that's why it's something I recommend for people to do, because you really have that sensation of going above and around things and literally floating above structures, which is cool. So I recommend.
Yeah, I would love to.
Scuba diving.
Never been. And the horizontal body.
You're horizontal.
Yeah,
you can
nice.
change your height just with your breath.
Cool.
With your buoyancy, you can go up or down just by expanding your lungs, and you can be, over a coral reef, but then all of a sudden be out onto a vast space. And so I just have this memory of like just crossing over the ocean floor, and really you forget that you're in water, right? And it's super cool. So when I found that, I said, oh wow, this connects all the dots.
Let's insert that into the piece.
Exactly.
Which Colleen described today as a dark flower, but it sounds like this section is very joyful.
Yeah,
that you're referring to.
This section at the beginning of the piece, I think, taps into a really joyous moment. So it's it is that like that flower part before the piece, I think, gets darker. So I would say that this part of the piece that I'm talking about is the lightest, most joyous part of the piece. But then yes, the rest of it has darker undertones and moves through more complex emotions.
I suppose they go together, right? The dark and the light.
Absolutely.
Especially of times of unrest or stress or dysregulation. I think balancing, being able to handle the dark times with the light times. That for me has been an anxiety diminisher. And what the company is focusing on is the last 12 minutes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the last 12 minutes of the piece, which is about like a 55-minute to an hour long piece.
Right, so we get the tail end of everything
that
goes on.
Yeah, it's piece. Really the culmination of everything that's happened, which is satisfying.
Very, absolutely.
And it's really nice because in the piece, it's there's lots of different things going on, but everyone really comes together, and this beautiful piece of music by Arvo Part comes in, and you really can just let go. I think as a dancer, performer, physical theater person, like this is a very satisfying moment to move through.
I haven't been able to get to the end of the 12 minutes, but as of now, I feel like I just want to dive in deeper and deeper and deeper because it has that kind of rich quality in the music, absolutely, but in the specific head movements that we've been researching, this kind of drop to then catch. And if this was not just an audio podcast, I would show what that is. But just the sensation that someone or something is driving my head forward, and then the reverb afterward that tends to happen in the piece has been so delicious to investigate.
Because you can really follow through with these things that are happening, and visually, at least I hope for an audience, because you really see these things happening. Yes, it's abstract, of course, but I feel like I'd hope there is some, because of the strength of the ensemble and the clarity and the intentions or impulses or where things are coming from, that there can be some of that kinetic empathy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I imagine many people in the audience know what it feels like to drop their head and then remember that they need to keep it upright. Like the falling asleep, at the wheel image that we keep talking about. So yeah, there's that relatable like sympathy as the audience is watching. And other themes that are coming up that I believe are fueling the whole ensemble together. We talked about like individual moments of panic. And then there's this wonderful moment which we just learned today, where we sort of drop and wake up to remember that we're not alone on stage. That was a nice switch.
Yeah, as a performer, especially in this, it's a balance between internal and your own things happening, and then also like recognizing other people. So it's fun and important to kind of, as a performer in this, to play with that, things that are happening to you specifically,
right? And
then seeing that you're in a group,
and that all of us in that moment have been through very similar feelings, and yet their reaction is just kind of like, nothing happened, everything's okay, let's keep walking through it. But no, it comes up again.
Yeah, it's like very sharp situation or texture changes, which at least for me is really satisfying. It's what I enjoy as a performer, as a dancer, as a everything, is a lot of like changing textures and states, and how much you can be fully involved. Maybe this taps into acting, of course, but like how really you can be fully involved in something, change it, drop it, like that full outness, for lack of a better word, into each experience is what I think, for me, what I'm drawn to as both a performer, a creator. And so the fall has a lot of that, and so for me it helped develop that, and I can enjoy it as well.
The title is itself so broad and like can be interpreted in so many different ways. Doesn't not necessarily have to be falling down. It could be the falling into, or the falling out of, or like that was also something that's been on my mind as we sort of switch those textures, especially when it comes to like my anatomy in a certain shape. How do I find the initiator into the next one, and how do those those sort of swings happen literally just in the physical body as I'm transferring my weight?
Yeah,
I've been trying to figure that out and be smart about it so that I'm not like tripping over myself.
Yeah,
but also tripping over myself is a part of the catching. So yeah, it is kind of an acting exercise of, I've been finding how to find reset quickly.
Dropping into something, dropping out of it, resetting, getting into something else.
Yeah.
Playing with the rhythms of moving in and out of things, which I find for dancers is really great, for physical theater people is really great, for like however you define those groups of people. For us in this piece, it's very physical, so it works on dancer trained bodies, but really it's about being fully present in your body. So it's not necessarily about being a dancer. It's about how to be present in your body, which is what I'm curious in working with a new group, getting that out of other people.
The actual falling down movements that we do, where we have to collapse our body, I suppose that is a technical thing that as dancers most of us have learned how to do. But I do wonder, like, why not allow an actor who moves, or a person off the street to feel that and sense that collapse for themselves? Yeah, it's not just a dancer piece. It's
a being fully present in your body and in the sensations, which again for me is very, very satisfying.
Yeah. You mentioned physical theater as a practice of yours, and I Frog in Hand works so much in that world building, dance and movement as a storytelling element.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just curious to like chat a little bit more about the ways in which the fall, I suppose just this section of the fall, builds the story, and then we get to the end, which I don't know very much about actually. So I would love to hear about that kind of arc as a story.
Yeah. The fall itself was a lot more abstract compared to other works that we've done with Frog in Hand, but it's still very much, it felt like a physical story, right? Moving through, we had a giant crash mat, we were doing things with that.
Oh, right,
It was for me, it felt like a bunch of beings or people coming into the space and navigating the challenges. And so even though it's very abstract, it's like navigating the challenges of the crash mat, or navigating the challenges of, we have there's lots of duet sections in the middle, navigating the challenges of existing together, and that kind of comes out in the duets. And then the end with this final section that we're doing in this year's Frog in Hand show, navigating those challenges that are happening, the physical pulls, the carpet being pulled out from under you, the anxiety. So then it kind of mounts up. So I see it as storytelling and navigating challenges.
The human condition can sometimes just be a challenge.
Yeah, and it kind of is very,
itself,
it's kind of very raw to that, like people are
right.
existing in this space and just navigating each other. And so I never had one particular story for this piece, but it did really feel like a journey, and really tapped into that dream within a dream sensation that we were really exploring, inception, all of those kinds of things. I guess, you can take it back to psychology or spirituality, like moving into another space with your mind, and that could be a dream or that could be something else, and experiencing something in there and dealing with those challenges and those sensations, which dreams are the easiest comparison, but
right, another dimension to tap into that's not the reality of what we have right now. And that is a challenge, at least for me, because it's not directly in front of me. I have to imagine it, and I have to mentally allow myself to go there, which in reality we're not told to. We're told to stay present and be here and try to focus on what's in front of us. And I just want to go back to some of those body horrors we were talking about today. And I say that term not to trigger anyone, but we were sort of just trying to find a bank of sensations where the body is being transformed, or it's being overrun by some force or something outside of us.
Yeah, we called it the weirdness.
The weirdness, yes. Yeah. And it's happening to us, but we're also trying to process it in real time. It's not as if we know what's happening to us.
Yeah.
That's a task.
Yeah. When we were creating it, those, they did come naturally out of just the build of the piece, but they are challenging. You have to really find something, an image that works for you, whether it's real or not, to really tap into something in your mind that takes you there. Because we wanted at the end of the piece to have these really visceral images that the audience can see, like something is really happening. And so the piece culminates to that. So whether it's your teeth falling out, or your fingers have become really long, or in my case, when we were making the piece, I think I had a nightmare where there was like some kind of hand reaching out, and so like I was able to really tap into something that just happened the other day. And
oh my goodness, no way. It's personal, like it's something that happened to you. So sometimes it's like I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to relive that feeling. My task right now is, I used to have nightmares that like a bunch of vines were closing in on me, kind of like restricting my body. And I had this one dream where the vines kind of grabbed my arms and made me suffocate. So I've been playing with my elbows like in my neck, and it's interesting because I have to do the initiating of it,
Mm-hmm.
and then allow myself to react to my
Mm-hmm.
own initiation of it.
Yeah.
And that sort of play between like how far is too far and like what is actually harming my body, like that's an interesting task and a challenge, I would say. But it reads as very, very sensual, and the emotion and the panic is right at the forefront when we see the body being transformed. And that's what I love about movement. We can get to those like really gritty places
Mm-hmm.
that often I think regular humans, quote unquote regular, the normies, the people
Yeah.
outside of the dance community, I don't think they necessarily understand that embodiment.
You get to like live embodiment in a different way, which for me, I don't know if satisfying is the right word, but it helps me. At least I think this is why I became a dance artist and felt a need to engage with this form. Was I felt like to process feelings or experiences, like I needed to experience that in my whole body, in
Right.
concrete or in abstract ways. And so it allows you to tap into things. And for me as a performer, I will fully go into something and fully really experience it. But it's very fulfilling to completely embody an experience with your body.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It's those multi layers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, it's so juicy. We have a couple more days of rehearsal with you, and we'll sort of finish off this section. But I'm just so like jazzed to be able to have a performer who was in the original, who can now give us their actual experience of being there, and the tips and the tricks and the, just having someone who kind of grounds us and anchors us has been really lovely.
Yeah. It's such a treat for me to be able to jump back into this and share it again, because I didn't know when I would. So it's such a treat.
So we'll be performing the section of the fall in our mixed bill coming up. So you can get tickets for that. I just wanted to switch gears for a second. You mentioned before we started recording about a practice as a dance artist that doesn't always have to be about dancing all the time. Can you speak to that a little bit about how you made that shift and what you think about as balance between being a dancer all the time and then time off?
Yeah. So I think I think about my personal practice or growth as just a life thing. But I think, when you grow up trying to do a specific art form and then you try to make a career out of it, that can get kind of skewed in different kinds of ways. And so I feel like I had to remove my growth as just a general thing. So I found that my practice and life and growing as a human or as an artist or whatever takes a lot of different forms. And I was able to access that through practicing dance professionally and performance professionally a lot. But then when I needed to take a step away from it and do something else and build up a slightly different skill set or a different career and take time to away, there's always that fear of like, oh, if you step away that you lose it, and that existed. But I did it at quite a good time where I was able to take time away. And I found that some people might have said, oh, do you ever, go back to this? Have you stopped this forever? And I found that in all of my other experiences in life, it all ties back to just my general growth in practice. So I feel like I have actually grown more as a dancer or as a dance artist or whatever you call it by not dancing all the time and taking time away, and now coming back to it. I feel so much more rich because I was able to take time to focus on other things, learn about other things. I didn't need to dance or take class all the time by doing other types of practices, physical practices, meditation, yoga, hiking, experiencing life in different ways. Those all both keep my body in shape, but also have developed me and myself in a way that when I come back to it, I feel probably much more capable than I was however many years ago.
Right. It's so important to remember we are humans. We make and we want to be fully involved in our creative endeavors so that we can respond to them as they're being shaped. And yet, it is an important part of the research, which is life. I often forget, like the sensations and the feelings and the anxieties that I want to include into a piece like The Fall that is outside of my dance practice most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been able to carve out what is most essential to you as a human, and with that comes artistic pursuits or ways in which you can collaborate on things, and it doesn't necessarily just have to be the one path. Is that sort of?
Yeah, I found more fulfillment in doing other things and then tapping back into my artistic self in different ways and seeing where it comes. Yeah, it'd be great to do everything and have amazing projects and shows all the time, but that's not
It'd be lovely.
yeah, but it's not realistic.
Not at all.
So I found almost more enjoyment and fulfillment by being able to do other things and find other ways to continue to grow myself. But thankfully, like, I still have my body functioning well and not in too much pain, so I can continue to tap back into the traditional dancing when I want in different ways, and I feel like I can come back to it a lot richer when I incorporate practices of meditation or presence or just different things that I've learned in my personal journey, and I can incorporate those. Like, even the act of going on a trek and walking through a valley and putting on some music and being able to move through that, to me, is just as satisfying.
I totally resonate. There's something that I've been trying to figure out, which is how to unblock myself when I feel creatively blocked. And it always leads to, going outside or getting out of
doing something different.
Exactly. The reset almost. Yeah. Like just realigning my body, my mind, my heart, my soul in something else. And then there's this period where I actually want to go back to a dance class, or I feel like inspired to go back because I've taken time away.
Mm-hmm.
I go and see an art gallery, something that's not anything to do with movement, and all of a sudden I understand how to do, a jump in a different way. Like it is interesting how the actual act of removing oneself from a practice can lead to a discovery that, and you use the word rich, that is like much more defined and feels fueling.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, because I took a long time from not, traditionally moving in a studio. But it feels even more fulfilling and rich to come back after and tap back into a bunch of things and realize, there's certain, obviously, techniques or things that you need a little bit of training and practice to maintain, but there's other stuff that not really. It kind of lives in your body, and you can, by getting stronger in other ways, you can achieve that.
And then take what you've learned and put it into an artistic thing.
Yeah.
It becomes more human.
Yeah.
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 Oh, that's lovely. And it sounds like, like being outside, is nature a big part of that for you? Maybe being in like new surroundings. Does that feel like a nice reset?
I would say it's a mix of things. Definitely my experiences in nature, getting way more into hiking and climbing and different types of, experiences while traveling, that all kind of contributes to that. When you're doing a very challenging hike, you have no choice but to be present and take in what's around you, and I found the most joy from those types of experiences, and they've also taught me a lot. Different things can be teachers, and so I've quite enjoyed that as I've been kind of trying to figure out what I want to, I don't have it all figured out, but what I need to keep doing to keep growing and learning. So a lot of that is a lot of thinking about a practice of being present, thinking about purpose, and thinking about taking steps outside of yourself to identify how to, I guess, be a better human, both with yourself and others, and deal with your own struggles. So a lot of that is the practice in being present and everything that comes with that.
You mentioned travel as being a part of your growth as a human. I'm not going to be like, where's your favorite place to travel to? But where have you felt most inspired, maybe?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of a twofold answer. I felt the most inspired when have met or been around certain people that have taught me different things or brought out different sides of me. I think that's really important. Being in a certain place with other kinds of people who maybe think in a different way, and they show you something different or get you to challenge thinking in a different way. And then also in places like where I've gone on in Peru, like multi-day trek hikes, that's been a big highlight of my last few years, because you're just in the wilderness, and it's not to sound like, granola, but there, for me, there's something really inspirational about that, because it also is a practice in being present and moving through the flow. And in those environments, I love being around cities and culture and doing all of that as well, but there's really something about immersing yourself in an isolated place that can be really inspiring, because you're fully taken out of your environment.
Right.
And it helps even more when there's no cell phone service.
Oh, it's the best when people can't reach me.
Yeah.
And I can't reach them.
So it's a very that I think was probably one of my most inspirational things recently.
Oh, that sounds lovely. The multi-day, like many days.
Yes.
I imagine you travel with people, like during that hike, it was with people.
Yeah,
you
it wasn't alone.
Okay, good.
No. Which also makes it fun too, right? Because you meet a new group of people, and all of a sudden you just hang out and connect, and there's no social pressure, which is really great. So, you obviously don't sleep great because you're sleeping in a tent on the ground, but aside from that, they're really rich experiences that you can recall really well because you were so present. Right. I can remember most of every moment, right?
Oh, and everyone is there because they want to be there.
Yeah.
They're curious about it. Sharing of that challenge that you're all overcoming, but also the enjoyment of it together.
Yeah. Very inspiring. I would recommend it, although I know not a lot of people like doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I would want to prepare myself. I don't know if I would just jump in. But then that's also a part of it, is just the kind of exposure to it and saying, well, I have everything I need.
Yeah.
It's not as if I'm going to be alone and without resources. I'd love to try that.
Yeah. I'd highly recommend.
Amazing.
The Santa Cruz trek in Peru.
Sounds really warm and sunny days. I would enjoy that.
A mix, yeah.
Yeah.
A mix, but you're looking at beautiful peaks and glaciers. You also see the Paramount Mountain, where they got the logo from. So very, very cool.
Well, and we're pretty lucky to be in the art shelter during these rehearsals. I feel like there's a mini sort of off-grid feeling. I do have service, but I often just put my phone to the side for 8 hours, and it's just like, all of a sudden I've found a connection to my body that's being in nature and feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the land and the sky, instead of the walls of an office building or a studio space where there's mirrors.
Exactly.
The art shelter completely removes all that, so we're all just here in kind of like a camping trip.
Yeah, you have to focus in on yourself.
Yeah, it's been so lovely. Micha, this has been great. I think we're out of time, but where can people find you if they want to connect with you online? Maybe not, because we hate online, but an email, or where can people find you next?
You can find me all around and everywhere, but you can find me on Instagram and connect with me there at Micha Baltman.
Amazing. I will link that in the description below. Yeah, super grateful for your time. I know that we kind of fit it in really fast, so thank you for sitting with me for this hour and just taking a moment to reflect.
My pleasure.
This was so great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Art Versations podcast. This podcast is crafted out of passionate community drive, and it only continues to grow with every bit of support. If you like what you heard, it would help if you took 2 minutes to leave a review. Learn more about the featured guests on the podcast Instagram at ArtVersationsPod. And don't forget to follow so you're up to date for the newest episodes. Big shout out to Jan Marquez for the marketing and branding creation of the pod. And cheers to you, listener. Till next time.